Okay.
Mark, should we call your mother? She's not here.
All right.
Right.
Everybody should see this. And all right. I'm just going to mute everybody, and then you could unmute yourselves if you have questions. So everybody see the first screen? Yeah, good. Okay. So this week we lost a lot of rabbis. I'm going to talk about it in my speech more. But one of the people we lost a lot of people. I mean, the Jewish people lost a lot of people, rabbis and other community leaders, other just people. It's a very difficult week for the Jewish people, and so I wanted to do a little bit something on Rabbi. One second, am I recording this? Yes, I'm recording this, I think. So I wanted to do something about Rabbi Twerski, because Rabbi Twerski did spend a lot of time talking about happiness in his more than 60 books that he's made. But I wanted to do something about Rabbi Twerski a little bit different than just I wanted to kind of like think along with Rabbi Twerski, show like some of the things that he thought about and how issues that he approached with others, the issues that he focused on, and how he dealt with those issues. So we're talking about happiness. I'd like to start off with a quick video before we get into it about Rabbi Twerski talking about happiness.
That happiness is self-fulfillment. I believe that if a person neglects fulfilling any capacity and trait that he has, there's an inherent feeling of unhappiness. If a person is gifted artistically and doesn't express it, if he is gifted musically and doesn't express it, he's neglecting part of himself, right? And is not fulfilling oneself. And if we took the effort to realize what we really are, the strength and the capacities that we have, the wonderful traits that we have, and develop them to the fullest, then we will be happy. And it's not going to depend on how much money we got, and what kind of automobile we got, or how many luxury homes we have. I believe.
So who was Rabbi Twerski? So Rabbi Twerski was very interesting.
I believe that happiness is.
So Rabbi Twerski was a very interesting individual. He actually grew up and went to. He grew up not. He went to public school. He didn't grow up as a rabbi. In fact, the story is told that he was once in this car with three other like rabbis, prominent rabbis, and he's like. They're talking about something that became secular, and he goes, "You guys don't understand. I understand. The reason why I could do it is they asked him about something. He goes, the reason I can relate to it is because I went to public school. I could relate to that." So the other person said, "What? You don't think I went to public school? I also went to public school." So then the other guy was like, "You don't think I went to? We all went to public school." So he goes, "Yeah, but could you sing Silent Night by heart now?" Because that's what they made me do when I was in public school. We had to learn Silent Night by heart. So I could really relate to the people. So Rabbi Twerski came from a prominent family. The Twerski family is prominent. Now, there's two Twerskis. Everybody asks, is that the Twerski with the I or the Twerski with the Y? Well, they're still both really related to each other. But he's the Rabbi Twerski with an I. His brother spoke at my kid's school a few years ago. He's like a Hasidic, he's like a Hasidic Rebbe in Milwaukee. But Rabbi Twerski went to not only went to public school, but then he went into training, and he spent 2 years in the staff of a state hospital in Pennsylvania, where he became the head of the psychiatry department of St. Francis. Now, that's just the basics of Rabbi Twerski. We're going to get into more of him, more about his life a little later. I wanted to tell you what I think he thought about. Rabbi Twerski had a problem. He saw the problem within the Jewish people. Now, what makes people great is that they see a problem and then they try to solve that problem. And that's when the people change the world. When they try to figure out how can we most of the people, most of the Jewish world is neglecting this particular problem. And Rabbi Twerski was the one who stood up and said, we cannot keep neglecting it. So what was the problem that Rabbi Twerski tried to solve that made him famous? So we see that he's looking at the Jewish community and he says, wow, the Jewish community is so great. We offer so much help so people when they're sick, we have Tehillim, we go bring meals, we do all these things when somebody's sick. And when somebody dies, so then we go help the family with the Shiva, and we do so many nice things. But then there's this part of our population that's completely neglected in the Jewish world. And so why is it neglected? The neglected is because people are either afraid of it or they don't know how to help. It makes them uncomfortable. So the first issue that he had to deal with is people with addictions. People with addictions. So what happens in the Jewish community? Now, I grew up. It's very common. When I grew up, there was a lot. I dealt with a lot of cases growing up of addictions, of drinking alcohol, especially alcohol. In the shul I grew up in, there was a lot of alcohol, and there was Kiddush clubs were out of hand. Not just like Kiddush club and you go get a shot. It's a Kiddush club and people come into shul completely drunk and making fools of themselves and screaming out and yelling at the rabbi when they didn't like what he said and embarrassing their family. And it led to lots of problems. There were lots of problems due to alcohol growing up. It was bad. So Rabbi Twerski saw this issue and he wanted to find, like, why is it that people are neglected in the period in the Jewish community? How can we help them? And also, how can we try to figure out ways of making the Jewish community better with this issue? How can we start educating the Jewish community to say that this is a real problem that exists and we should deal with it as a community, not something that you just hide and you say it doesn't exist and you just make excuses and try to hide it, but reach out to the families and say, you're not alone in this, that there's other people with these problems, and we have ways of dealing with it ourselves. So when Rabbi Twerski came to the floor, the only people there was the AA meetings, right? Alcohol Anonymous. But what was it? It was in churches. So if you wanted to help somebody, you'd have to send them into a church and get them help. But he sat in these AA meetings and he was very impressed by what they had to offer and what they were saying. And he felt that we could change the Jewish world through this idea. So that's really what he did. And he took this AA system and he incorporated it into a lot of different things that he did. A lot of these books that he wrote all came from the AA system. And what Rabbi Twerski said, which is interesting, is he said he has over 60 books. And we'll talk about that later on, his books. But he said that really he only wrote one book. He wrote one book, and he just had made the message differently for different people and for different issues. So we'll go into it, but a little bit more. But that's what he did. He wanted to try to take the problem and bring it to Jewish law, and he did. He was successful. Well, when we talk about these problems, it's because of Rabbi Twerski that we're talking about these problems within the Jewish world as much as we're talking about it. And I still think it's a big problem. And I think a lot of the things that he stood out for still are big problems that we have in the Jewish community. But Rabbi Twerski was the one who brought it to light. So how do we start building somebody up when they're stuck? right? That's what Rabbi Twerski had to deal with, because it's one thing of getting the message out, but then you have to help people. So how do you do it? How do you help somebody when they're completely stuck in this this situation? And how do you help families when they have somebody, a loved one, that's stuck in this situation? So Rabbi Twerski takes our hands and he walks us through some of the steps to give somebody the ability to build themselves up from when they're completely down. So let's listen to what Rabbi Twerski has to say.
There's something I want to tell you about the stress and how we have to look at stress. Okay. And I think it's an important thing because many people have told me from my lectures, it's the one thing they remember. Okay. I was sitting in a dentist's office and looked at an article that said, "How do lobsters grow?" Well, I don't care how lobsters grow. But I was interested in it. And it points out that a lobster is a soft, mushy animal that lives inside of a rigid shell. That rigid shell does not expand. Well, how can the lobster grow? Well, as the lobster grows, that shell becomes very confining. Right? And the lobster feels itself under pressure and uncomfortable. It goes under a rock formation to protect itself from predatory fish, casts off the shell, and produces a new one. Well, eventually, that shell becomes very uncomfortable as it grows, right? Back under the rocks. And the lobster repeats this numerous times. The stimulus for the lobster to be able to grow is that it feels uncomfortable. Right? Now, if lobsters had doctors, they would never grow, because as soon as the lobster feels uncomfortable, goes to the doctor, gets a Valium, gets a Percocet, feels fine, never gets off its shell. So I think that we have to realize that times of stress are also times that are signals for growth. And if we use adversity properly, we can grow through adversity.
That message is so important that it's like, I mean, I said this so many times in my shirim, but it's something that I think is just so important, that when something bad happens to somebody, so they always call me up, they always say, "Rabbi, we should check the mezuzah." I said, it's not the mezuzah's fault. In other words, it's not the mezuzah's fault that the thing happened. What you need to do at this time is to look at yourself and say, sometimes there are things that are completely out of our hands, right? But the Jewish way is always to look at ourselves and say, are we doing everything that we can to be better? Are we taking care of our own, our own Dalit Amos, our own backyard? Are we taking care of it? Because because this is the time when you feel uncomfortable, when something happens, things are not going right. So the first thing what we want to do is say, this is a moment of growth. And you have to reevaluate your life and say, maybe I'm just trying to make, maybe there's reasons that it's not good. Like people are stuck in a bad, they're in a job and they don't get along with their boss, and the boss is giving a lot of tension. So they have to either ask themselves, maybe I'm not doing the right job. Maybe the boss has a point, right? And maybe I'll be happier if I do a better job. Or maybe this is not the right job for me. And maybe I should use this opportunity to say, okay, now I see that it's going to be hard. We may have to take a step back, some financially or something, and put off the new car or put off the vacation. But maybe it's time that we take a step back so I could take a step forward in the future. And so that all starts with being uncomfortable. And the first thing he's saying is that when you feel uncomfortable, that's the time that we should start looking at ourselves. So why is change so hard? So what I'm going to do in this lecture is not just play. You could go on to YouTube and watch tons and tons of Rabbi Twerski. I watched tons of them, of his things, but I didn't want to just play videos for you of him saying. I wanted to actually go into his books and try to get a message that flows through the whole shir. So why is change so hard? So Rabbi Twerski writes that there's certain things that we do that block us from being able to change. So the first thing he says is the idea of denial, that we're creatures of habit and we're comfortable with things. And change is uncomfortable. So what we want to do is we want to just stay as comfortable as we can. So the natural state of all matter, including human beings, is inertia. But once one's forced to overcome inertia, you need to be able to overcome it in order to grow and change. Because growth and change, as he says, is not a comfortable situation. But it's necessary in order to grow. Rationalization. So he says, denial enables a person to maintain a status quo. When reality threatens to overcome denial, the mind employs defense mechanisms to try to reinforce denial, such as rationalization. And then he brings it explains from the Ramchal. So you have to try to break through the idea that we deny the rationalization, break through the denials. Habituation is the same kind of idea, is that we're very comfortable. The Talmud says that when a person does a forbidden act several times, it loses its opprobrium. The habituation enables one to think that transgressions are permissible. And we all know this is true, that the first time you do something, you feel really terrible about it. And the 10th time, you make excuses that it's okay. He has a few others. Projection. Oh, gosh. One who projects onto another will not be able to do genuine tshuva. Sins committed against another person are not forbidden on Yom Kippur unless one obtained forgiveness from the offended individual. The defense mechanism of projection turns things around. I did not offend him. He should really apologize to me. I'll tell you, I deal with this all the time as a rabbi. It's unbelievable how people could flip a situation where they're completely wrong and then switch it to where they're tzaddik. Trivializing. The tendency to trivialize in halacha is another impediment to tshuva. I was busy. I was this. I couldn't do it. I was too busy. And ego, which is always the number one. Ego gets involved, and it's a big problem. So what happens? So he says that often you need somebody to kind of hit rock bottom before you could help them. Everybody's heard that in order to help an addict, you have to have them hit rock bottom. So, but what's rock bottom for a non-addict? So what constitutes a rock bottom? So he says, a person who contemplates his life goals and sees his behavior is jeopardizing his reaching those goals may reach rock bottom. But this requires giving serious thought to defining one's goals and purpose in life. Confronting death can usually lead to such introspection. I recently attended the funeral of a great Talmid Chacham. A man said to me soberly, Rav Z is taking along with him much Torah mitzvos. What will I be taking along? I think that's so powerful. Such a powerful statement. Like you say to yourself, what am I going to take along? What's the me at the end of the day that people are, that I'm going to go up to God and say, this is what I accomplished in the world. And everybody also, what my kids and everybody says, this is who you were. And it's for you to look in the mirror and say, this is who I was. And this is what I did. So Rabbi Twerski says that a lot of people, what they do is they turn to things that will bring them momentary pleasure or just contentment. Like, today what they're saying is, everybody's talking about how much Netflix, the binging on the Netflix and so on. It doesn't stop the problem from being there. It just kind of masks it. And the masking of the problem doesn't ever put it away. Let's hear Rabbi Twerski.
I've never tried cocaine or heroin, but I believe the people that tell me that it's a very pleasurable feeling. And the problem is that there is never enough. It's an insatiable thing. It's a bottomless pit. And just as it's true of the pleasure of addiction, I believe it's true of all pleasures in the world. There's nothing wrong with having pleasure. I love to put chocolate syrup on my ice cream. Right? I enjoy it. It's a pleasure thing. But my life does not become dependent on pleasure. Because if your life becomes dependent on pleasure, then as soon as one pleasure is over with, then you got to go for the next one. And that becomes like an addiction. And there's never any goal to it. There's never any end to it. So you see, pleasure
Whoops, I'm sorry.
as a goal in life is essentially an animal trait, because that's what animals are looking for. Contentment, comfort, isn't that wonderful? Yes. As a goal in life, I think that's an insult. You know, you go into the supermarket and look at the counter where they sell evaporated milk. And if you look at Carnation milk, it has on the can a little slogan, milk from contented cows. Now, you know, when I first saw that, I started thinking, why should I care whether the cows are content or not? But you see, the manufacturer of that product wants me to buy his product, and he wants to tell me that his brand is superior to the others. Why is it superior? Because it comes from the most excellent cows. Why are his cows most excellent? Because they're contented. Well, if contentment is the excellence of a cow, and if all I look for in life is contentment, then I share a golden life with a cow. And I'm not ready to lower myself to that stage. Nothing wrong with being content. But contentment as a goal in life is an animal trait, not a human trait. And if contentment and pleasure becomes the goal in life, then people who experience pain or suffering or difficulties in one way or another can't possibly have happiness. But that's not true. We know that there are people who, in spite of many personal distresses, have been able to be happy. Because true happiness is beyond contentment. It's beyond comfort and beyond pleasure. What then is true happiness? True happiness is becoming a partner with God and developing ourselves into that which He wanted us to be. A unique human being who exercises the unique human traits of thinking about a goal and purpose in life. Animals can't do that. Of constantly striving for self-improvement. Animals can't do that. Of getting out of one's shell and being considerate of strangers, of others, and helping them. Animals can't do that. Of being able to make decisions that are morally right, even though it may be uncomfortable to do so. Animals can't do that. The ability to forgive others. Animals can't do that. The ability to search for what is truth. Animals can't do that either. And so if you make a list of what the unique features of a human being are, and seriously make an attempt at fulfilling them, then you become a partner with God in your creation, and you become a full human being. However, if we only go as far as using our intellect to help us find more ways in which to have pleasure, then we are still functioning at a Homo sapiens level, at an animal level, and we are an incomplete person. And a person who is incomplete can't be any happier than a car which is incomplete and has parts of the motors missing. For a car to function properly, all the parts have to be there and all have to be operating properly. And for us to be a complete human being, all the parts of humanity have to be there. I've never tried cocaine or heroin.
So what he's saying is something so important, that what does it mean to be a human being? What really is our goal in life that will really bring us to have complete fulfillment in our life? And Rabbi Noah Weinberg has a class, an excellent class, if you've never heard of it. It's called The 5 Levels of Pleasure. And he says, what are the 5 levels of pleasure? And the worst level, the 5th level, is money, right? It's something that comes and goes. But when he gets to the 4th level of pleasure, so he talks about the idea of having something bigger than oneself. He says that as much as people love their children, you'll see people sacrificing their families for an ideal that's greater than themselves. And then his highest level is clinging to God. But what Rabbi Twerski here is saying is that for us to be individuals, we have to have that thing that we're see as greater than ourselves. That's what makes us humans, where we could plan, where we could be excited, where we could go forward for push for, and that will bring us to be something unique, because nobody else could do that for us. There's something you could do. There's something that you could do. You could do a lot of things yourself, but nobody could be you. God only made one you. And too often people are trying very hard to be like other people. It's one thing they say, I wanted this person to be my hero. So there's one thing to model yourself a little bit after somebody and see how they did things well. And then you model that behavior so you could get it yourself. But there's another thing where somebody's so jealous of the person that they lose who they are and they become not somebody else. And God could make computers that could, God has made computers. The computers could do the same action over and over and over. And God doesn't need that. God needs you to be you, right? There's only one of you. And the only way you could do that is to find your thing, whatever your thing is. You have to find your thing and use it to become a better and to better the world. Rabbi Tarfon says in Pirkei Avos, we have that it's lo alecha amalacha ligmar v'lo ata ben chorim levatel mimena. That it's not up to you to finish the job, but you have to be into the job. In other words, the job has to become a part of you. You have to have the goal. You have to have something that makes you get up in the morning and want to push forward with dreams and aspirations and so on. And that's what he says. The animals don't have that. They can't see the future. They can see the future and squirreling away, nuts, how they have something to live through the winter, but they can't see the goal. They can't see the purpose of life, how they could change society and make things better. And that's what we as humans could do. And that's what gives our lives meaning. And that's what Rabbi Twerski will say.
I think it's important for a person, in order to have a feeling of self-worth and a feeling of self-esteem, to have a purpose in life. Living a purposeless life, so what kind of significance is that, right? And tell the story of 2 vagrants who were arrested for loitering, right? And the judge asked one guy, what were you doing when you were arrested? He says, nothing. He asked the other one, what were you doing when you were arrested? He says, I was helping him. If you're helping somebody who is doing nothing, you're doing nothing, right? And I think if we have this kind of domino thing where everybody's helping everybody else, but nobody has an idea of what it's for. So I think we have to have a sense of purpose. And this may be where religion comes in, that religion says, no, the world wasn't a big accident. It was created for a purpose. And if you don't know what that purpose is, investigate, right? Look for a purpose in life. A purpose of the world and a purpose for yourself in the world. Because otherwise, to feel purposeless, my example is this. What kind of things have value to us? I tell people, go home and look at what kind of things you own. Right? There are some things that are aesthetic, ornamental. They have no function, but they're ornamental. And there are some things that have a function, and their value is in their function. Okay. You have a beautiful grandfather clock, right? It stops working. It can't be repaired. You keep it there because it's a beautiful piece of furniture, right? It's ornamental, it's attractive. You have a can opener that goes dull. It's not ornamental, you throw it away. Okay. Ornamental, aesthetic versus function. Those are the only 2 criteria for value. What about me? Ornamental, Yeah? I look in the mirror and I realize, no, not ornamental. Right? Well, my value then has to be on function. Well, what is my function? Is my function coming home from work, kicking off my shoes, putting on the slippers, sitting in front of the TV with a 6-can of beer? Yeah, that's not a function that can make anybody proud of being who oneself one is. So I think that in order to get a good sense of self-worth, and by the way, to give it to our children also, we have a purpose. What is my purpose in life? And within the family, what does this family stand for? If we look for purpose, right? It was a very great rabbi who says, the looking is the finding, right? Search, yeah, it's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? But as you search, you develop your traits, you develop your skills, you develop your philosophy of life, begin to search. Too many people don't search. Everything is taken for granted. This is the way the world is. So I think that we have to search for purpose. Many people will find a humanistic purpose. My purpose in life is trying to make life better for others. My purpose in life is trying to do something about the environment, right? To avoid acid rain, whatever. Okay. My purpose in life is trying to do something about famine in Ethiopia. You can find a purpose, but you have to look for a purpose. Too often, people just go along, traveling along from day to day without giving any thought into purpose. I think it's important for...
So Rabbi Twerski has a book called Growing Each Day. You can actually find it on the Aisha Torah site. Has each day, it has a little piece of it. And so he writes, a doctor who treats for nothing is worth nothing. The Talmud teaches that there's no free lunch. Anything of value comes with a price tag. And if something is given away for free, we should suspect that it must be worthless. People are reluctant to accept things as true. Today, a millennium and a half after the Talmud is written down, we still yearn to get things for free. And if not completely free, then at least possible cost. Nothing's wrong with bargain hunting. At the end of the season, some leftover merchandise of good quality may be on sale, or discontinued models may be available at the fraction of the original price. Still, we must be cautious that we do not extend this purchase into bargains to areas where it can be destructive, such as relationships and other things of spiritual value. Valuable relationships can be costly. If we are not willing to sacrifice our comfort for a relationship, but look for friends or spouses that will demand nothing of us, the Talmud teaches that this relationship will be exactly what we invest in it, nothing. Likewise, if we seek spiritual goals that come easily to us without any effort or deprivation on our part, we'll achieve the goals that are worth nothing. The Talmud uses the example of free medical care to teach us that for things that are truly important, such as our health, we must be willing to bear the cost. And we should apply this lessons to other things of value. And that's so important. I see that also. It's like people want, they want the least amount of friction. And when friction happens, so rather than looking at it as a chance of growth or a chance of coming together as a couple, as he said, ways of finding where my purpose and where I'm going in life. So people try to get it quickly. They want the easy way out. There's a Gemara that tells us that this rabbi goes to a boy and he asked how to get to town, and so the boy says there's a short way, which is really a long way, and a long way, which is really a short way. So so he follows the short way, and he comes right up to town, and there's a gate there. So then he has to walk all the way back to the boy, and he says, "What did you send me this way for?" So he says, "I told you, it's the shortest way to get to town, but it's going to take you the longest amount of time because you're going to have to come back and go back the other way." So that's really what it is in life, that people, if you want, it's going to take some time to go the longer way where we could actually grow. So how do you find your goals?
I went out to a salmon fishery on the West Coast. And very interesting is the life cycle of the salmon. It's born up in the river, and then it swims down to the ocean, and it grows. And then toward the end of its life, it fights the tide and swims against the tide back to where it was born to lay its eggs and die. Okay. And then I watched it as the salmon swims around and comes to a cascade. And so it jumps over the cascade. Now, if it doesn't succeed, it swims around a little bit and recharges its energy and jumps again. And it does so many times until it gets to where it wants to go. And the lesson is, now the salmon has a intuitive, instinctive idea as to where it's supposed to go. We don't have that as an instinct, but we have it as an intellectual awareness where we're supposed to go. And if we have a goal and a mission and an idea as to what our purpose is in life, then we fight the tide to get there. And if we come to a cascade, we recharge our energies and we jump and get to the next level. And then what do? Go to the next level until we get to where our goal is. But that means that we have a goal. But where are we going to get a goal in life from? Only one place. Only from the one who said, let us make man. You and I together. I will give you the potential and you're supposed to develop it to where you're supposed to go, where you're supposed to be. What is man's obligation in the world? Animals don't have obligations. Animals don't have a mission. We have a mission and we have an obligation. And it's only with that fulfilling that mission and obligation that we become complete. Because unless we do so, no matter what else we have, trust me, I have treated some of the multi-million-dollar families in the country that have everything that anybody could possibly want to achieve and to gain. And they've been miserable. Don't trust the television when it tells you, get this and you'll be happy. Our happiness is going to come from only one place. From the source that said, let us make man. And has given us the Torah that tells us in which way we are supposed to be different than animals. I went out to a salmon fish.
One of the things that Rabbi Twerski did is one of the books he wrote is When the Good Things Start, Rabbi Twerski, and he did it with Charles Schultz. And so what he did is he tried to, as I said, he tried to find ways of taking the message and bringing it to different people, so you could see it in a different light. You know, if you read it, sometimes you could hear the same message over and over, and it doesn't sink in. And then somebody gives an analogy, somebody does a cartoon, somebody does something, and then it hits. And that's what Rabbi Twerski was trying to do with all his different books. Here you have a cue. You can enjoy success, right? Some people start ventures, and just when it seems to be on the verge of success, they do something to undermine it. And now you see this, it's people get in their own way all the time. People get in their own way. It seems like everything's going right. And then all of a sudden they get into their own way. And it's like in the Peanuts cartoon here, it says, I was praying that for greater patience and understanding, but I quit because I was afraid I might get it, right? So that's what happens, that people are afraid that of what the success means. It's not that they don't want to really, it makes them uncomfortable. When you're an infant, you crawl on all fours. Since you no longer do so, you obviously mastered the art of walking, although you undoubtedly fell a few times before getting the knack of it. So you've already had the experience of preserving at something in spite of failure, and trading in an old method for a more efficient one. Capitalize on that experience. Don't be afraid of success. So when Rabbi Twerski, after he had success on Alcoholics Anonymous, he started to look for all the areas. He became all areas that people were suffering in the Jewish community, was not able to deal with it. This was his daughter-in-law, who became very involved in spousal abuse, and Rabbi Twerski wrote a book on it. He saw they told him she told him, Deborah's very close. Deborah's close with his daughter, and so she said, she's a therapist, and so she brought it to his attention, and what did he do? He did something about it. He didn't just say tisk tisk. He said, this is an area where the Jewish community is hiding its eyes. We have to do something, and he wrote a book, and he went speaking about it. He has a website, guardyoureyes.com. He has a very powerful speech on pornography and what it's doing to the Jewish community and how it's ruining marriages all over the place. So what Rabbi Twerski says, he wrote, I wrote more than 60 books, but I really only wrote one book 60 different ways. His basic theme was the importance of self-esteem. And he considered the lack of self-esteem that was the root of most of the psychological problems, such as addiction and marital strife. And that's what he did. Now listen to this story. It's very, very interesting, very great story. Years ago, Rabbi Twerski started a rehabilitation program in Israel for ex-convicts who have been in prison for drug-related crimes. Another area where people in the Jewish community hide their eyes. There's so many people who are in jail, and I've had to deal with it myself. I had somebody once called me, and he was going to jail. I don't even know who he was. He wouldn't tell me his name, but he decided based on somebody that I was going to be his rabbi. And he called me like almost every week, and we'd talk about his trial and everything. And I didn't look for who he was. I didn't try to find out. He didn't want to tell me his name, but he was in for a very serious crime, and he was going to be going away, and we were dealing with all the issues of family and so on. And this is something that the Jewish community is not good with. And now we're starting to be a little better. We have, rabbis going into the jails and trying to help people out. But here, Rabbi Twerski took it on himself, and he wanted to find ways of dealing with it. So at the first meeting, he said that recovery depends on developing self-esteem. Avi, one of the ex-cons, objected that he could never develop self-esteem. He was 34 years old and spent half his life in prison. What could he feel self-respect about? Have you ever seen a display of diamonds in a jewelry store window? Those diamonds are scantily beautiful and worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you know what they look like before they were brought out of the diamond mine? They looked ugly, dirty pieces of glass. I may not be a maven expert on diamonds, Avi, but I'm a maven on people. You have a beautiful soul within you, but it's covered with ugly behavior. We will help you get rid of those layers and reveal the beauty of your soul. And then the story goes on that Avi got a job afterwards. He was moving people, and somebody left like $5,000 that he could have stole. He could have stole the money, and he didn't. He actually turned in the money and gave it back. And he then came and he made a plaque. Avi had a bronze plaque made and affixed to the door of the Rahab Center. It reads, Diamond Processing Center. So you see that Rabbi Twerski, he cared about these people. He cared about people, and he didn't look at just the problems, the small problems, the accepted problems, but he went and he cared about everybody, and he brought these problems to light within the Jewish world. So what did he do? So Rabbi Twerski felt that life doesn't just go on as expected. We learned that from the corona, that life doesn't think. So how do you deal with suffering that appears?
One of the mysteries of life is suffering. Now, if people just believe that the world is an accident, there is no God, whatever, and suffering happens, so it happens, right? So there is no purpose in suffering, it just happens, right? If a person believes that the world was created by God and that God controls the world, then which becomes very serious, and that is a benevolent God, right? And a benevolent God, why does he allow people to suffer? Right? How can I trust a God who allows people to suffer? My answer to that partially came from a incident that happened in a pediatrician's office, right? There's in the waiting room, there's a little child, happy child, bubbly, playing, smiling. And he came in, the mother brought him for his second or third immunization. Well, as soon as the doctor came out in his white coat, the kid took one look at the doctor. Yeah, he knows what's going this guy. This guy's up to no good, right? It's the guy who goes around stabbing little kids, right? So he holds on to his mother tightly, right? And the mother picks him up and walks into the treatment room, right? And he starts kicking the mother, right? And he can't understand what happened with my mother? Why is she doing this to me, right? He has no way of understanding that this pain that he's going to go through is going to somehow save his life, right? The interesting thing is, after the doctor stabs him, gives him the shot, the child grabs the mother, right? I said, well, why are you trying to find security in your mother? Isn't she the one who collaborated with the monster? Yeah, the child can't figure that out, right? But he knows that his security is in the mother. When I suffer, I don't understand why God is doing this to me. I feel I don't deserve it, right? And I may be angry at God, right? But even if I'm angry at God, it's like the child with the mother. He's still my security. I don't understand it. I don't think that if we believe that God runs the world, that we can ever have an understanding of suffering that makes sense. I just have to leave it up to faith. God knows what he's doing. I don't understand it.
Finally, the last thing before we end, where does we move to? So we move to the ultimate way of us growing and giving, which is love and giving, and all.
Love is a word that in our culture has almost lost its meaning. There's a very interesting story about the Rebbe of Kotsk, who came across a young man who was clearly enjoying a dish of fish that he was eating. And he said, young man, why are you eating that fish? And the young man says, because I love fish. He says, oh, you love the fish. That's why you took it out of the water and killed it and boiled it. He said, don't tell me you love the fish. You love yourself. And because the fish tastes good to you, therefore, you took it out of the water and killed it and boiled it. So much of what is love, right, is fish love, right? And so, young couple falls in love. Young man and young woman fall in love. What does that mean? That means that he saw in this woman someone who he felt could provide him with all of his physical and emotional needs. And she saw in this man somebody she feels that she can write. That was love, right? But each one is looking out for their own needs. Right? It's not love for the other. The other person becomes a vehicle for my gratification. Too much of what is called love is fish love. Right? An external love is not on what I'm going to get, but what I'm going to give. We had an ethicist, Rabbi Dr, who said, the people make a serious mistake in thinking that you give to those whom you love. And the real answer is, you love those to whom you give. Right? And his point is, if I give something to you, I've invested myself in you, right? And since self-love is a given, everybody loves themselves. Now that part of me has become in you, right? There's part of me in you that I love. Right? So true love is a love of giving, not a love of receiving.
So all these powerful messages that he has. What did Rabbi Twerski give this world? He gave us countless people all over the world hope, and he cared about them. He wrote 60 books. He had multiple shiurim and lectures. He trained therapists and social workers. He became a guide for everybody who's dealing with addictions, all the different types of issues. He started different foundations, rehabilitation centers, and so on, in order to just try to help people who the Jewish community was not helping, or the world was not adequately helping. And then there's one more thing, and this is such a great story, so I'll end with this story. And so we'll go back to the story of what Rabbi Twerski said, that person who left the world, look at how great he was. He left with all this knowledge, all this stuff. He left the world. What am I leaving the world with? So I'll show you something that you may not know, you may know, you may not know. I didn't know actually until after he died and I saw his funeral. But this great story.
a song composed by Rabbi Twerski himself that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, loved so much. The song Hoshea Samecha. Rabbi Twerski, did you compose the song Hoshea Samecha? Yes, he did. So for all those who don't think that Rabbi Twerski, or they're not sure, we have verification today that Rabbi Twerski composed the song. The Rebbe loved the song very much as well. People think it's a Chabad song, but it's Rabbi Twerski's song. So let's sing Hoshea Samecha. In 1960, it was the week before my younger brother
married. And I was davening, and I remember the spot that I was at in the shul. And I was davening Shachris Hoidu, and I came to the phrase, Hoshea Samecha, right? We ask Hashem, save help your people, and bless your inheritance, right? And elevate them into eternity. And as I was saying that, I started thinking to myself, next week, the week after that, my younger brother got married. So I sang it at his wedding, and it caught on. And some people who were at the wedding who went to Israel, and they brought the song to Israel. And a few weeks later, a new tune came from Israel. And this was the tune. It was a song of the Breslev Chassidim. I said, okay. Then later I heard it's a Chabad song. Okay, what do I care? I can't copyright it anyway. Right? So, but it's Baruch Hashem, it was a composition that I'm happy to have made. Okay, let's go.
At his funeral, and I'll play this while as we go out, he said, I don't want any hespedim. I don't want anything. I just want them to sing Hoshea Samecha. And that's what you have. Yeah, if you see the funeral, they're just walking with his body, singing Hoshea Samecha. Thank you all for coming to the show.
Hello? Yes.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Laila Tov.
I don't have it. Let me